Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to Downtime. With me tonight is Isandring. It's been a while since we've done one of these, you and I.
It's been a hot minute, or I guess it's winter, so it's a cold minute.
Yeah. So there we go. The fireplace.
That's how long it's been. It was hot the last time we did it, and now it's cold.
Oh, dear Lord. Oh, so how you doing?
Okay. Getting ready to, well, not getting ready to. I'm on my way to Kentucky.
Oh?
Yeah. I'm going to go try and catch the Kentucky Derby.
Are you really? Well,
I have no idea when it runs.
Well, that shows you I have no idea either. I believed you.
So. I think they hold it in Lexington, and I'm going to Louisville. So I'm going to go get a baseball bat. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Get a Louisville Slugger.
There you go. All right. Well, so you and I were talking like a couple nights ago about Tuesday's show, and it's a bummer we weren't recording that because we were pretty. There was a lot to talk. Tuesday's show was interesting. So we had on 𝗢𝗛𝗄 and Brooks to discuss extremism and how to combat extremism in the U.S. I was thrilled. I don't know. Aaron looks at things a little differently than I do. So, it was just, I was like, let's establish first, do you agree that extremism is on the rise in the U.S.? And he said, yes. I was like, okay, great. We're good. We're moving forward. There's an action plan. And I think ultimately his solution is very far afield, but it sounds like at least at a minimum he was talking about the problem that causes extremism is inequality. Does that sound to you like what he was saying?
I think that's one of the driving factors of driving people into extremist positions.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, for him, I think that was the argument he was making, and that even the meritocracy is going to have inequality. Now, a meritocracy we all think of as golly gee whiz, the best way to do things, because why wouldn't you want to have the best rising to the top? But his argument was, well, that's even going to drive extremism. So that was one of his complaints. But the central thing, I guess, for me was that, inequality, which makes sense. The more people feel like they've been disenfranchised, like they haven't been treated fairly, they go out and look for a way to give those complaints physical expression. Does that make sense to you? What do you think?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the song "The Trees" by Rush.
I don't know it.
You don't know it? Oh my God. That is a great song. You gotta, because it takes like real world things that kind of happen and they have trees do it instead, and it sounds so absurd. You should listen to it.
All right. Well,
I mean, some of the lyrics to it are like, "There's unrest in the forest, and the maples think they're right. The oaks are just too greedy, and they grab up all the light. The elks can't help their feelings if they like the way they're made. Why can't the maples be happy in their shade? Or they wonder why the maples can't be happy in their shade." You got to listen to the song, man. It's pretty funny.
Well, so what do you think about what he said about meritocracy? Because I wanted to talk about that and a couple of his other notions and a couple of things that Brooks said. So figured maybe we could decompress, decompact. My brain's in neutral right now, but yeah, what were you going to say?
Unpack. We'll try and unpack what we can while he's not here to defend himself.
Oh, absolutely.
Or to tell us what he's wrong.
Manning. Yeah. I'm going to straw man the living daylights out of his position.
Well, I mean, meritocracy on the surface sounds like a really great thing, and he even admits that it sounds like a great thing, but he's like, it's really not. It's not. It's a horrible idea, and what we really have isn't a meritocracy, and And it's like, I didn't know all of his positions. I didn't know, everything that he espouses. So it's like, I'm listening to this for the first time. So it's like, I have a hard time. It's like, okay, well, on the fly, let's try and, come up with any kind of rebuttals to this. I did think about it a little bit, and it's like, I don't think it's realistic that it is possible to get away from a meritocracy when it comes to human beings. I don't think that's possible. And the question is whether we want to try and make it as fair a meritocracy as we can, or whether you rail against it and, fail at getting rid of it anyway. I mean, I think that's something interesting and fundamental to human beings is a sense of meritocracy. I don't think you can get rid of it. I think it's baked into our cake. But yeah, it's like he has a lot of problems with meritocracy and would rather, get people thinking about, the events of their life, or essentially the culmination of their life, is nothing more than luck. As he said several times, it's luck all the way down. I always thought it was supposed to be turtles all the way down. I'm very shocked to find out that it's luck instead. But, he's not entirely wrong either. At least these are all obviously just kind of how I'm viewing this. It's like, well, yeah, everybody's life fundamentally revolves around luck. It's like, it's luck where you were born, who you were born to, what resources did you have when you were born. It's like, I'm lucky I was born now instead of in 1800s in rural China. So,
yeah, and that's one of the interesting things, which is he had pointed this out, and I thought this is an interesting thing that needs unpacking. And then we got a couple comments in the live chat that I'd like to get to in a super chat. But he had pointed out, because one of the things that I was thinking about was it isn't a lack of things that makes people get radicalized and sort of foments a genuine dissatisfaction with the system. He had pointed out that most of the people in on January 6th were white middle class, maybe even upper middle class. I mean, this is not the have-nots in our society. The problem is that they do feel that there is a disparity somewhere, and it was that disparity that was driving it. But again, compared to any human being, start with humans 100,000 years ago. Go from, which is roughly when the human race first, popped onto the scene. So we've been around for 100,000 years, all the way up until, say, 50 to 100 years ago. That entire span of time, everybody at January 6th has it better than just about anybody in that time. Even the Rockefellers. And you can say the Rockefellers were rich for their time, but they didn't have access to the same kind of medicine. Rockefeller's son could have been saved by medicines that we have today. All the money in the world didn't save his son back then. So it's still, by modern times, even Rockefeller, wasn't on some scale living as well as the rest of us, and yet we still have this dissatisfaction. So real quick, Sinister Porpoise, $2. The Trees by Rush comes off as anti-union. Thank you, Sinister, for your super chat. We really appreciate your support. I appreciate it. You've always been generous with your super chats, and so thank you. I haven't heard it, as I said before. Now it looks like I'm going to be required to listen to it. We've had a super chat based on it. Isandring is, normally when Isandring makes a recommendation, it's something I really work hard to avoid. But at this point, we've had a super chat. I think I'm going to have to. So, but
I think you'll find it funny. I just thought it was funny. It's applied to trees.
I know.
It makes the whole thing sound absurd.
The way you described it, actually, I really did want to. I did want to. And you said the lyrics that made me want to see it. Titan Meritocracy has not even been corrupted. We just reward entirely the entirely wrong achievements. Maya, I agree with Titan and hate Isandring for making me say that. Jesus, you always draw.
I know. People hate me. I'm just hated. I'm so persecuted. Where's my gun?
Oh no, here we go. Oh no. We're creating a monster. So it's not the have-nots per se, because the people who were committing January 6th weren't in the have-nots, but they felt like there was great injustices towards them, and that they had to completely upend the system over that. So it never crossed my mind. I really liked how he talked about the meritocracy and how he put that on the table. That was done in a way I had never thought of. I'm not convinced that, and I didn't say this then because Brooks and he were getting into it. I also didn't necessarily have the time I had the thoughts, but necessarily the time to voice them in a way that was salient and could be understood. But human beings are the most adaptable creatures on the planet. That's why we're the most successful, at least by the metrics that we like to use. And it seems to me that if whatever you find to balance things out and make things as equal as possible, there's always going to be somebody who finds dissatisfaction with that system over this, and it just becomes over smaller and smaller things. But we're going to blow them up to be big things, whatever they are, whether or not you can get a better haircut than somebody, whatever it is, they will find things. At least it seems to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that because people vary so widely. What is that saying? It's like you can never make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time. Although, interestingly, it seems possible to make 100% of the people 100% or unhappy 100% of the time if you really try. But yeah, it's there's so many people have so many different ideas. There's so many different cultures. It's like you can't have just one thing that's going to work for everyone. Somebody's going to find something to complain about because for whatever reason, they're not where they want to be. Or they think somebody else has it better than them, whether they actually do or not. A lot of this has to do with just perceptions. And, as your perceptions shrink to avoid things that, are pretty big, like, is that a lion in the grass and is it going to eat me? Well, we don't really have to worry about that anymore. Unless you're actually living outside in Africa where there are lions, and I guess you still do need to worry about that. But we've kind of moved past that whole thing where, nature is trying to kill us successfully. We generally manage to avoid that, so we don't worry about it so much. Well, now what are we going to worry about? We are still animals, and we still have instinctual drives. One of those is to survive and to avoid danger. So, yeah, we're always going to have things that we're going to complain about. We're going to be dissatisfied with something somewhere along the way. I don't think you can avoid that.
And I think that dissatisfaction is actually a part of one of our better natures, believe it or not. I think when we become dissatisfied, that's when we seek to change things and to improve things. It's on one hand, idle hands. Here we go with the hands again. We're going to be cutting off a lot of hands today. On one hand, they say idle hands are the devil's playground. On the other hand...
Figuratively.
Yes. On the other hand, it's people who are bored who innovate. There's a number of reasons that drive innovation, but one of them is people who sit there and say, well, and this was kind of the idea behind UBI, which is when you free people up from having to worry about the basic necessities in life, they end up having more time and energy that they can commit to actually making a better society, and that inherently they're interested in that in one way or another. And not everybody, of course, but I don't know. Lost my stream of the COVID brain has been striking in full.
Well, yeah, and I also think that necessity, there's the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And, there are dissatisfaction with the way that the crop yields that we have, that led to better crop yields. So dissatisfaction can lead us to changing things and trying to make things better, too. So it's like, I don't think you can get rid of it. And it's probably a good thing you can't get rid of it. Otherwise, I think we'd stagnate. But it does pose a problem when elements get dissatisfied, and especially when those elements that are dissatisfied don't feel like they're being heard or are being maligned or marginalized. they start to get resentful. And I think when things start tipping over into resentment, that's where you start having problems. And that's where you start seeing a lot of the violence pop up from, is a bunch of resentful people.
What do you think
whether they're justified in their resentment or not?
Yeah. Well, so what do you think the people on January 6th resented?
That they finally saw their guy in the way, and now suddenly there's a bunch of stuff that their sense was that everything was conspiring against their guy, and that it just kind of culminated in all of this. And so they were already getting angry. It seemed like the media was against him. It seemed like everybody was against him. So, it's like, well, we have to support him no matter what, because all of these people that are pushing policies that we don't like, and, trying to change a bunch of stuff that we don't want changed. And, it just seemed like the machine was against everything, and they resented that.
This just reminds me, okay, here it is. I do have the clip here. So I thought it was on my phone, but I've got it here. I'm going to play a clip. Oh, dear Lord.
Please tell me we're storming the Capitol.
No. A fantasy movie would make more sense than this. This is... once again, Marjorie Taylor Greene just being completely unhinged. Let me make sure that I've got the get the right one here. It's going to take a sec. So, no, I think you're right, and there's usually at least some truth to these things, but it doesn't take very long before somebody gets really, really upset, and they start sort of applying worse charity, and everything they hear is a conspiracy. Everything they hear is a confirmation of, whatever the worst is that they believe that's going on. And here we go. This isn't okay. Thought I had it. It didn't take. So I'm gonna try this one more time here. Oh, there you go. That'll snag it. And it's really hard. That was the other thing that we sort of touched upon, but I'd like to try to understand more, which is how do you get people out of that mode? Once somebody's in this mode that, they're all out to get me and everything is proof of this conspiracy. I have no idea how you deprogram somebody from that state. I think it was appropriate suggesting that it was essentially a type of cult deprogramming. But all right, I'm going to play this. This is let's see.
I'm charging hazard pay for you making me listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, I know. I feel kind of bad. And it's getting. I mean, this was. I felt the same way listening to Michelle Bachmann, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I detest even more. So, but let's go and hear what she's got to say.
Joe Biden, you can take classified documents. Nobody cares. But if you're Donald J. Trump, we're going to raid your house.
Yeah, this is where I have a serious issue, Dan. I've been saying we need to impeach Merrick Garland. Here's another example of why we should impeach Merrick Garland, because of the hypocrisy of the two-tier justice system that we see every single day flow out of the Department of Justice. The very fact that President Trump's home was raided, that our former First Lady Melania Trump was so disrespected, all of her clothes were gone through, even their son Barron, his bedroom, his golf clubs. They went through everything, and this is how they treat President Trump. But when it comes to Joe Biden, it's kid gloves, because he's really just an old man that has to be taken care of and protected.
Just a tip. I'm not an expert, but if you want to be treated with kid gloves, don't ignore and or violate 2 subpoenas from the Department of Justice. Just saying. Now that right there.
I have to point out too that Merrick Garland did appoint a special prosecutor to look into the classified documents that Joe Biden had. So I mean, well, he did do that to both of them. So,
well, and Trump, they knew Trump had those documents, and for 6 months they tried to negotiate the return of those documents. I call that kid gloves. They didn't send in SEAL Team 6 after 5 minutes. You know, she presented that as, oh my God, they just attacked and raped. No, there was 6 months of negotiations. He finally returned like half of them, lied, said he had returned all of them. They actually considered the matter closed until they realized he still had more, meaning he's, you know, obstruction of justice. He's been lying to the State Department. He's been taking these classified documents and he's been refusing to return them. After all of that, like a year after they first learned he had them, then they went in. By that timetable, Trump's got a year before, Biden's got a year before they, but, you know, people are going to hear what she's saying and believe it. It's like, oh yeah, they did raid Trump's house, and I don't see anybody raiding Biden's house. That's because when he was the first one to tip them off as to the documents. His lawyers went in and said, yeah, we found out we've got documents here. So, you know, there's so many fucking differences. So I don't know how you combat something like this.
yeah, and the fact that it just keeps going on by so many different people too. Yeah, and we stick yourself. We have the amazing ability to really stick ourselves in our own little bubbles now. So if all you're doing is listening to, you know, whatever show that was, all you're doing is listening to these very far right places, you're going to get inundated with this idea that Trump is just being persecuted hardcore all the time, and it's nonstop, and you know, he hasn't done anything to actually deserve this. And so, yeah, you hear that all the time. Eventually, you are convinced of it because that's the only thing you ever hear. And they give you plenty of compelling stories. They'll give you compelling video, compelling audio. You know, of course, it's not all of the video and audio and stuff that they actually have. So you're getting just a cherry-picked portion of it just that supports, you know, their narrative. And when you hear that all day, every day, you know, just like living in a cult. I think that's a very apt description, and I think he's probably very right in how you try and break that is treat them like, you know, people coming out of a cult. The problem is how do you get them out? So, you know, they're living their own lives. It's like, how do you remove them from this? Because that's one of the things you have to do if you're going to try and get somebody out of a cult is you have to get them away from the cult to begin with. And I'm not sure how you do that in today's age.
And I'm gonna play this again for just 1 second here. So here we go.
Joe Biden, you can take classified documents. Nobody cares.
All right. So I just want to make sure that the echo is gone. Sorry, I didn't realize there was an echo. I think the problem's fixed. I just wanted to test that. I don't think we need to hear that again, as long as you guys understood it, because I think it's worth hearing and seeing what. But I'm not going to subject you to that nonsense again, unless you guys would like to see it. I do apologize for the echo. Hopefully, it was gone there. So, yeah, I don't know what my concern is, and he had pointed this out too, which is it sort of creates a self-feeding. Oh, it's still echoing, is it? Jesus. Okay. It creates this self-feeding cycle because what ends up happening is the people on the left are going to feel like they're not being treated seriously, and they're going to sit there and say, look, you know, shit like this is just lies. You're making up stuff about our guys now. You're making up stuff about Merrick Garland. You're making up stuff about Biden and tossing in that cute line about him being old to boot, which is just she doesn't even believe the you know, oh, he has to be treated like kid gloves because he's old. Nobody suggested that. She's just throwing that in to point out the fact that he's old. You know, that radicalizes people on the left, and I don't. It's interesting trying to figure out how you de-escalate something like this once it's started.
Yeah, and that's the $1 million question. It's like, it doesn't seem like anybody really knows how do we arrest this and break out of it. Historically, it just collapses and we start something else. You know, or there's an overwhelming populist movement that rises up and kind of defeats this, pushes this ideology out, and you know, there's kind of a resetting of fundamental values, and I'm not sure which is going to happen here. I mean, sometimes they do organically die. They'll start dying off. The cult leaders die off, and so the cult dies off. That happens too. So I'm not sure where this is going to go. It doesn't look like it's going in a good area, and I don't think that we should be complacent. We should call out bullshit when we see bullshit, and I think that's about the only way we can continue forward. As far as trying to fix it societally, I'm not beyond being able to, get young children and teach them good philosophical principles and critical thinking skills so that they'll be able to, analyze all of the bombardment of information they're going to get throughout their lives, and have at least some idea of how to parse through that to find out, okay, this is probably not true, this probably is, and to have the tools available to, figure out which is which. So I'm not sure where this is all going to go, or if we can even fix it before, it's because a lot of the fixes that we're talking about are slow incremental fixes. And I brought this up. It's like, well, if we're degrading faster than we can fix it, does it really matter if we try to fix it? It's all going to come apart anyway. So it's like, not only do you have to figure out a plan that actually works, but it has to work fast enough to, overtake the deterioration. And right now we don't have that answer.
Sorry, I'm dealing with. I don't know what technology has risen against me over the last couple of days, and nothing seems to be working. I think so. Hopefully, if that previous thing was echoing, the fireplace could easily be echoing too. So it may be fixed now. We'll try it. But let's see. And then
stick a duck up there instead of the fire. Put a duck up there because ducks don't echo.
Ducks don't echo.
Nope. A duck's quack doesn't echo.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Mythbusters did a whole thing on,
I'm not sure I believe you. I'm really not sure I believe you.
Mythbusters.
I kind of think
Mythbusters.
No, I'm not going to. I kind of think you're lying to me. I'm just saying. Especially after that.
I'm just trolling you.
Yeah, after that, I'm going to go see the Kentucky Derby, and I was just like, oh, good for you. Tell me how that goes, man. Like, I don't know when the fucking Kentucky Derby is. I was like,
sorry. I was always told growing up, ducks quacks don't echo. I don't know where I heard it or why I heard it. Mythbusters did an episode on does a duck's quack actually echo or not, and I have to be honest here. I don't remember what they determined, whether that was plausible.
So you are. So no. Let's cut to the chase. You're trolling me. Let's just. I was right. My instincts were right. My biases were right. And or critical thinking. I'm just okay. I got it. I know where we are. Well,
the interweb says it's true.
I'm going to say two things on that. First of all, the other thing is, I've seen so many people that I had thought were critical thinkers or you'd expect to be critical thinkers, and you end up seeing them fail in some catastrophic way. And the great James Randi was an example of this. He took on a lover who was clearly just there for the money and just taking advantage of him. And then the guy, as I recall, ended up running off, and then they caught up with him, and he was like, oh no, this was not. And there was no amount of evidence that could convince Randi that this guy was taking advantage of him. And there was a whole documentary on it, and it was very sad, but it was like, here's Randi, who's one of the most skeptical people on the planet, getting taken in by a con artist in his love life. And we've done a couple of episodes. I've forgotten the guest's name who had come in and talked about critical thinking, and he said, "Oh no, I'm just as bad at it as everyone else." And he had learned a little bit about how to sort of maybe see when he's doing it and get a little better at it. And I used to think that the difference between the people who really understood critical thinking and the people who didn't was as big as the Grand Canyon in terms of their ability to process information. And now I think, like, on a day-to-day level, it's the difference is like the size of a crack in the sidewalk. I mean, it's not that. It's not as, I think it's helpful. It's better than not. I think it's helpful in evaluating things. But the most critical of thinkers still fails reasonably frequently from what I can tell.
Yeah, we fall victim to our own biases. And, I'm not sure how to fix that, because you're always going to have your own biases. So, I mean, I guess always telling yourself, well, it's not particularly useful either to sit there in every single thing. It's like, well, I might be biased here. I've got some biases. Maybe I should look into, am I biased about this, or am I thinking about this clearly? And, sometimes, especially dealing with other people can completely fool you. And, we're supposed to be really good at like reading body language, being able to read, especially facial gestures. I mean, there's a lot. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a whole thing about why our eyes are kind of, set up the way they are when you look at other animals in the wild, and how their irises are usually cover most of their eye. The sclera is not usually very visible, yet in human beings we have a very prominent sclera, and it's white, along with the irises of our eyes are a different color, so we can clearly see where somebody else is looking, because that's incredibly important to us, where other human beings are looking. So there's, but we can get totally duped by some people, and it's like other people can sit back and see it so clearly because they're they don't have a dog in the race. They can be a lot more objective about things, and sometimes you get hung up on something and you just can't see past this. Even if people tell you straight out, look, this is what's happening, and you're like, yeah, that's not the feeling that I have, and it's like, I can't believe you, because this is, it's like so many people have pointed out, it's like, well, you don't really choose your beliefs. I guess there's some arguments for or against whether you can choose your beliefs or not, but it's like you're either convinced of something or you're not. And if you're convinced of it and somebody else just out of the blue tells you, oh, that's not true, it's really hard to change somebody's mind, especially when they're emotionally involved in something. You mix emotions into things and things get so muddy so fast. I think maybe the Vulcans had it right.
Yeah, I think but we evolved for emotions to have emotions for a reason, and there is one or two upsides to it in terms of being able to construct a stable society, believe it or not. I think for individual relationships, emotions have a tendency to be very disruptive and for an individual's functioning, but actually that I can tell at the societal level, it can help create a more structured society. I'll explain why in a minute. But Gaming with Robin, £6. Thank you so much, Gaming with Robin. We really appreciate your support, your membership, and your super chats. Thank you so much. When examined by an audio expert, it was found that the echo was, quote, swallowed by the original quack due to the very similar acoustic structure. So that, I guess, in fact, I always say pounds. It's euro. Oh my God. Yes, it is. It's euro. Yes, I do say pounds. Yes, it is euro. Thank you. Sorry.
So essentially, yeah, they do, but you can't hear it anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
They might as well not. It's a distinction without a difference.
Yep. I do think. So, if everybody were perfectly rational, there's this huge part of me that says, and I was talking to 𝗲𝗲 about this, and he had some interesting thoughts about how emotion influences us in ways that that I personally hadn't considered. But one of the things I was thinking about was when you're thinking of doing something unethical, whatever that unethical thing may be, whether it's, stealing something from somebody, doing something that's going to harm somebody else.
Cheating on a test.
Cheating on a test a little less so. Having relations with a married woman, something like this. One of the things that keeps people from doing stuff like that is that the people involved who would get pissed at it may not respond rationally. The rational thing, if your spouse cheats on you with somebody else, The rational thing isn't to blame the other person, it's to blame your spouse. Your spouse is the one with whom you have the relationship. Your spouse is the one who's taken the vows. Your spouse, the other person may or may not even have known you were married, but let's assume that they knew. Okay, is it a nice thing to, sleep with somebody else's spouse? Probably not, but on the flip side, what did they really do wrong? It's the spouse that broke either the social contract or, if you're married, a written contract, actually. But one thing that discourages guys from doing this in some cases is the idea that the husband's going to go out and, blow their kneecaps off. And we do have a tendency to blame not our spouse because we're in love with them. We have a vested interest in sort of minimizing their involvement or engagement in it. Well, they were tricked by this person or whatever. And maximize the blame of the other person to the extent where people die over this shit. So the net result is that people are actually less inclined to, it's just one more stone on the scales when you consider doing at least certain kinds of immoral activity is, well, I may get a punishment far in excess of whatever the crime was, and so maybe I'll stay away from it.
Yeah, fear of an irrational response.
Yeah. And
negative,
I think that,
rational negative anger response. There we go.
Well, or at least a very disproportionate response that is boosted not by rationality, but by emotion, especially anger. And I think that makes us more sensitive to what we do. I think in general, we try to be somewhat more aware of our actions and more cognizant of how we interact with people because we're aware that a misstep can actually have a response that is in excess of what we think would necessarily be appropriate for whatever that action was. So in that sense, I think...
Yeah, emotion...
Yeah, please.
I can see how emotion would be a good regulator of behavior, fear especially.
Yeah, I think it can be, and I've never taken that into account. I've always thought that would be far better off. I will say this, the worst decisions I've ever made in my life, the worst mistakes I've ever made in my life that I can think of, all of them were in an excess of emotion. They were in excess of anger, in excess of love, in excess of, pick an emotion. It compromised my ability to think rationally, and I went out and did stupid things because I said, hey, these feelings justify it. And then by the time you're all said and done, you're like, wow, that was stupid.
When you can look at it with a little bit calmer mind and you realize, that's, I don't know what I was thinking there. And it's like, well, you weren't really thinking, you were feeling.
Yeah. So I would like to, I always say I'd like to get rid of all emotions, and I think that's great. I used to be able to control my emotions much better. In fact, really, for the most part, my emotions were usually just kind of off unless I let them go on. And as I've gotten older, sort of in my mid to late 30s, that didn't really operate that way anymore. And now it's anyways, I've considered like meditation, a few other things, just trying to get, but it used to be that it was just kind of natural for me to, and it pissed the living daylights out of most of the people I met, who also said, by the way, like, it must be so easy. I was thinking, don't mistake composure for ease. I just, was able to, on some, just not take it into account, I guess. Just somehow it was off. I don't know how to explain it, but I haven't been able to do that in a very, very long time, at least not consistently. So I think by being able to do that, too, that, of course, informs what I think is important. My best friend in college was athletic as fuck. Holy shit. He was talented in basically any sport. He did weightlifting, but he also was incredible at baseball. And, he'd just take a snowball and there'd be a target, 50 yards out, and just say, I'm going to go hit that. And like, no way. And throws it, boom, just hits it, first shot. And he was far more athletically inclined than I was. I was smarter than him. and he would tell me, well, intelligence is great, and you're this really smart guy, but if you don't have health, if you don't have, if you're not getting good physical exercise and all this other stuff, it's worthless. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but health is great, but we're all reasonably healthy. Just stay reasonably healthy, and then if you're really smart, well, that's the most important thing, right? Of course, we're each catering to what we're best at, is what I found, and most people do that. They think the most important things in life are the ones that they happen to have a edge on for some reason. So, speaking of biases,
yeah, it can get really difficult, and I guess I think empathy would probably be a really positive thing to have. So is empathy an emotion? I mean, there's a reason people fear sociopaths.
But sociopaths do have emotion; they're just lacking in empathy. But that's a common
That's
common
why
thinking is
yeah. That's why I was saying is empathy actually an emotion? Though I'm not really sure about that. Because sociopaths do have emotions, often very passionate emotions, but they completely lack in empathy. So
they also often
it's like they don't have a problem.
They often lack in fear as well, which is an emotion. And somebody who doesn't have fear is dangerous and hard to keep alive when they're younger.
Very, very dangerous, both to others and to themselves.
Yes. Well, yeah, it is. It's hard to keep them alive when they're younger, but once they sort of learn how to reason things out and sort of maximize their chances logically as opposed to fear. But, yeah.
Kind of like the people that they lack whatever transmitter or receiver it is that transmits pain. So they just simply don't feel physical pain. Yeah. Those people statistically die fairly young because they don't have those warning issues. Because there's been pretty much any time I've been in pain, I've been like, oh, why can't I be one of those people that couldn't feel pain? I wouldn't have any of these problems. Except that, it's like, well, what happens if you don't feel pain and you get a gallstone? So I'm sitting there with a gallstone going, oh my God, this sucks for 6 hours. Could you please just give me the morphine now? No, we got to scan you first and find out what's wrong. Well, if I didn't feel any pain, I would have never gone to the doctor to find out why I'm in so much pain. And I could have ruptured the bile duct or the gall sac itself, and that's really bad for your body. And if you're not, so yeah, they tend to die young, not feeling pain.
Well,
though when I'm in pain, I still kind of wish I couldn't feel pain.
They have to check as well, so they have to actually when every night they check their entire body to see if they've got any broken bones. So they have to check all the major bones in the body, see if they because if they broke a leg or something, especially if the break is punctured and ruptured through the skin, that's something they need to know about. They need to get that fixed. Yeah, but with no pain.
Leprosy can do that to you too. I mean, Thomas the Covenant, the Unbeliever. Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. He had to do that too. He had to do a personal check. Okay, did I hurt something? It was because of leprosy, though.
So,
how the hell did we get on not feeling pain?
Oh, it was the lack of empathy and or lack of having any kind of extreme lack of fear to lack of. I can't believe I actually worked that backwards because I am so foggy, but I was able to work one step backwards.
Sweet.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
I was gonna write down the conversation we had. It was yesterday. I was gonna write down a bunch of stuff, but of course, writing and driving is not a great thing. And I'm thinking, I'll just write it down when I stop. Well, kind of like when you say, I'll write it down, and then so I don't forget it, but you forget where you wrote it down at.
Yeah.
So, we mentioned it's like, I wish we could have actually recorded that discussion because it was actually pretty good. So I'm sitting here trying to think. It's like, what did we even discuss? I mean, I know at some point it was like getting rid of capitalism for something, or how capitalism creates inequality. And I'm like, yeah, but every system creates inequality. Everything that we've tried, they all create inequality. It's just how fast and how severe does it create inequality. And then I was like, yeah, but remember, capitalism is the absolute worst system we've ever come up with one exception, and that's every other system we've tried. There isn't another system that's created the kind of prosperity and improvement in health lifespan, quality of life, living standards, etc., than capitalism.
Yeah.
And something about we can't get rid of it because it's always going to be there because you have human beings. It's always, what is that? I can't remember now. Why I should have written it down while I was driving. Dan the family of 4 with the 2 kids waving at me in the back. I should have written it down anyway.
No. I'm good with one show is not worth it, and there's still plenty of things to talk about. Well, so the first thing is, at least in terms of meritocracy, we're still pretty new at this. I think you had mentioned this during the show, which is it hasn't been around all that long. Usually, I think he had said that too. We've had it was either royalty or whatever metric was used to determine who would be in charge. It wasn't necessarily a meritocracy, and even now, it's still not a meritocracy in many respects. Certainly, the skills needed to get you elected are very different than the skills needed to actually run a country. And that's a serious problem. It's 2 different skill sets. So we're selecting for people who can communicate an idea concisely in an easily digestible way and who has a way of connecting with voters. That's who gets selected. That has nothing to do with who runs the country.
I would say. Yeah, I'm not sure I would say it has a good way of connecting with voters. I would say somebody who is incredibly good at manipulating emotions.
I think that helps.
That seems to me to be the absolute. That actually seems like the most important thing because, everybody that I've ever talked to aren't voting for people really for rational reasons. They're voting on emotional reasons, and maybe that's just the people. Sample size of 1 here.
I agree, but I don't know that manipulation is conscious. So I don't like the word manipulation. So Trump was able to connect with a huge segment of the voters. How he did it, whether he did it with genuine empathy, which, spoiler, no. Whether he did it because he's like them, spoiler, no. Whether he did it because he was being manipulative, well, maybe, maybe not. He's a salesman. I think he always has some of that in him. But he was able to connect. In some cases, he was able to connect by being so unpolished and by being so much like the regular Joe. So I agree he was probably manipulating people, and he knew that he was saying shit that wasn't. Actually, I don't think he knew he was saying shit that wasn't true. It's the difference between lying and bullshit. Everything was bullshit. He was just making shit up, but he didn't think of it as making shit up. And he's even said that's basically how he goes through life. That's how he's determined his net worth. It's whatever he feels. If he feels it's true, it's true. And when he says the coal jobs are coming back, he feels it's true, so it's true. You can say that's manipulation. I think it is, but it's a gray area. But he also connected by, not being the most intelligent guy in the room, and plenty of people were sitting there saying, I like him because he reminds me of me or people I know, because he's not the guy who's in there spouting all the big words. He may know all the big words, the biggest words, all the best words, but he doesn't use them, and he doesn't show off with them, and he has a heart. He just eats a pizza and all that other stuff. And I think that it was that connection, and some of that connection was manipulation. Some of it was his lack of refinement and polish, the fact that he hadn't been in politics. I don't think that was deliberate or manipulative, but that enhanced his connection to enough voters that he was able to almost win the first time and lose the second time.
Yeah, it's like once he made president, that was one of the things that it's like, what, can nobody shut this guy up? Take his phone away. Don't break his fingers. Don't let him tweet. It's like, just shut up. Like, he'd have done so much better if he just would have shut up. But of course, not shutting up is what kind of won him the election to begin with. And it's like if you have success with some kind of strategy, trying to peel somebody out of that strategy can be difficult, even if that strategy, as you pointed out, the difference between getting elected and then actually trying to govern a country are 2 vastly different things. yet he's it's like, well, this got me into the presidency. I'm keeping doing this because this is what's worked. And it's like, well, but you've got a different job now. Like, this isn't what made it necessarily work. And so that was one thing, even before, he started doing some of the bat's not crazy things that he was doing. And, people were starting to make, good reasoned cases against a lot of the stuff that he was doing, pointing out things that he was doing. And I was like, I didn't realize he was doing that. Even before all that, where I'm like, hey, give him a shot. Let's see what he does. And I was still going, oh my God, would you stop tweeting? No, just shut up.
So what's your worst complaint? Oh, this was the other thing. I think the other thing is it's been a bit of a long day for me. I think it's been a bit of a long drive for you. That conversation we had was earlier in the day, and I think when you and I are doing downtime, we should do it earlier in the day. We'll both be fresher, and it'll be easier. I think the other thing is we both had the full day. There was no reason to do this at 9. I'm sitting there going, why didn't I move it for 3? McMillan needs to do 9:30, but you can do just about any time. But let me ask you, what is your chief complaint against capitalism?
My chief complaint against capitalism.
Yeah.
That it allows enough freedom. This is both a good thing. It's like one of the great things, and it's also my chief complaint against capitalism. It allows too much liberty for coercion and what is the other? Manipulation. So instead of having a good open market, you can get to the point where you can coerce and manipulate the markets to your favor, and there's no inborn mechanism to correct for that. That's my chief complaint, other than just people.
Well, and you had pointed out also that it doesn't actually handle. Most other systems have a mechanism for handling people who, for one reason or another, cannot compete in the same sense. For whatever reason, they're either lack of education or severe medical issues, or for some reason they can't engage in the capitalistic market in the same way everyone else can. And despite them maybe having many things that could contribute to society, that basically ends it in capitalism. We have a mixed economy here, which is why we do have social safety nets. But in just raw capitalism, there really isn't one.
No, there isn't. It's survival of the fittest, and it doesn't give a shit about. It's one of my concerns with capitalism. It's not my biggest one because it only affects that kind of 10% of the population, whereas the no checks stopping somebody from amassing enough power, influence, and resources to manipulate the markets, especially in their own favor, that affects everybody. But yeah, the fact that there are no mechanisms there's and it's about 10%. From all the studies or psychologists, sociologists, I guess, that I've listened to, that 10% number seems to be where everybody kind of falls into. There's just 10% of the population that is incapable of competing in a truly free market without some sort of assistance. They're never going to succeed. They can't get ahead. They're just, for whatever reason. And there is nothing in capitalism that provides for them. Other than, I guess you could make the argument, the charity of, neighbors and friends and family and social groups, social organizations. But that's not really a function of capitalism itself. Whereas you get in a lot of some of the other systems that are proposed, there's specifically something in there about taking care of everybody, and capitalism doesn't have that.
Yeah. So in socialism, every man according to his gifts, and everyone according to their needs receives. Wow. Yep. not put that together well tonight. And they're already.
Would you like me to say it?
Yes, please.
Oh God! Now you're gonna put me on the spot, and I'm gonna be like, "How does that say?"
Whoa! Stop! Back up a step. I did not put you on the spot. I ignored it. I was going forward, and then you impaled yourself on that spot.
From each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. That's how families
Okay,
are
there you go. I think that's it. There you go. There you go. Thank you.
Robin.
And capitalism does not account. And you're right. Capitalism doesn't prohibit charity, and that was one of the things when people were talking about Ayn Rand and like, oh, what I hate about Ayn Rand is she hated charity. She actually, I think she did hate charity, and I think she did opine on that once or twice. But she made it crystal clear that she thought charity was a free choice, and if people wanted to, if it made them feel good for one reason or another, they should go right ahead and do it. But it shouldn't be a part of the system. It's not charity in communism. They're not talking about, let me stick with Marxism. They're not talking about, it's not charity per se, it's just the way the system works is the system automatically adjusts based on what people need and or what they can produce. So they're automatically taken care of in that system, and they're just completely ignored in capitalism.
Right, and it's specifically, it's like all the citizens will be ensured the fundamentals of life. And that's, of course, we're looking at the best picture, at least the theory of the philosophy behind it. I've never seen any country claiming that it was socialist that actually fulfilled any of those things. But damn it, if I'd have been the dictator, if I'd have been Stalin, I would have ushered in the utopia.
Yeah, exactly right. That's what the and then what was the recent example of that? There was a it's always, the person who has the actual vision and ability to implement a system like that is usually the first one who's shot in the back of the head once it's implemented and taken over then by the next guy. That was, by the way, it wasn't Stalin who was issuing the utopia. It was Lenin, who probably had pure motives and was I think I think followed Marxist ideals, to the best of my recollection, it's been a while, correctly. But then Stalin showed up and said, oh, let me take over. And, yeah, and I mean, it can happen in any system. I hear that same complaint, though, right? Which is, okay, well, communism has never really been tried. Well, it's sort of like, well, yeah, it was tried and it failed when somebody destroyed it, which it's never been tried with nobody destroying it. That's true, but maybe there's a reason for that. But then again, you also hear people on the far right saying capitalism has never been fully tried. It's certainly, this is, ours is probably the closest anyone has ever come to a purely capitalist market, but it's still not a purely capitalist market in the U.S. And so that's their major complaint is, well, you can't blame capitalism when everybody here is doing crony capitalism and when it's been corrupted in so many ways.
Yeah, and corporatism sneaks in. I mean, when you get the power of the government, and here's one of the reasons why I'm a smaller government advocate, is because when the government...
Hold on.
Yeah, I know.
This portion of the show has been provided to you by okay, no, I'm sorry. Anyways, please continue.
Are you quite done now? Is the reason I want governments this way, or to have as little power as possible, is because the more power government gets to it, the more everybody's fighting over control of it. And I mean, we see that now. Big corporations are buying politicians. We complain about this all the time. All the money in politics. The reason the money in politics, because there's a hell of a lot of money in the government and a lot of power in the government. And if you can co-opt that power and that money, well, why wouldn't you try? You make your life a hell of a lot better, or make your life miserable for your opponents. I mean, this is kind of what happened during the Dark Ages. I mean, that's kind of why we ended up with a separation of church and state, was because, the church kept trying to capture the government and vice versa. Led to lots and lots of wars. Figured out maybe that isn't such a great thing.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's one of the reasons why it's like, look, if the federal government only did those things that were actually constitutionally and intended by the founders for the government to do, yeah, we wouldn't have a lot of the safety nets that we have today. People would have a hell of a rocky, hard bottom if they fell, they stumbled. It's so, what is it, the dangerous freedom? Yeah, there's a lot of risk involved in that. But we also wouldn't have large corporations trying to buy their politicians, because it wouldn't be worth it. What would their politicians be able to actually do for them? Not a whole lot. Now, that's not saying that we wouldn't still have problems with large, powerful corporations influencing things, but the state governments were empowered with a hell of a lot more power to control those kinds of things. So I don't like having the federal government with that much power. The closer you can keep government to the individual people, the better off you are, because the less anonymity there is in it. It's like the federal government, the kind of bureaucracy that runs the federal government, nobody knows who any of those people are. They're not really accountable to anybody.
And that's a good point. I mean, the internet, what we see, anonymity is an interesting fucking thing. It's been sort of one of my complaints about a lot of social media is nobody knows who they're talking to, and that can be a problem because when you don't have your name tied to what you say, and this is just I mean, you can see this in real time on Twitter. People suddenly become a lot more aggressive, a lot more belligerent, and say things they would never say to a person to their face, but without their name attached and with the person not there, it becomes a lot easier. So that's one example of anonymity, and that were the downsides of it. But the other one is that you had brought up before too, is that communism on a small scale could work quite well, but that's because there'd be no anonymity. It's once a country gets big enough that, or a communist society gets big enough that you don't know the people who are giving and receiving the money anymore, that it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and the leaders aren't, having to face all of the people that they're leading. When they put forward different programs, it's like they don't have to see these people face to face every single day. These policies have badly affected us. We're starving to death here. It's like they're not seeing those people face to face. So it's really easy to convince yourself, hey, I'm doing the right thing, but these people over here are suffering. Well, you don't see it. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So it becomes really easy to for things to go sideways really fast when you introduce anonymity, because there's you start losing accountability when you have an animated. No, I just can't say that word now. Anonymity. So and that accountability is really important. I mean, I think that's why in small groups, like you'll see tribal, native tribes still that exist in the world today, like in the Amazon, out in the wilds of Africa, and in central parts of Asia. A lot of those tribal communities are pretty damn communist. The family unit is a complete communist organization. It works really, really well on small scales, but as soon as you scale it out to the size of the United States, or some of the other countries, the USSR, it starts having a lot of really bad problems, and it starts to implode. And it pretty much implodes everywhere it's been tried, or has led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century alone. It's like we've kind of run the experiment. It's like, yeah, of course it hasn't been tried. Well, actually, it has been tried successfully and faithfully. It's called the family. But as soon as you start getting bigger than that, it fails. Every time it fails. So I don't know how you fix that.
There's a great comment here. I watched the movie The Gilligan Manifesto. Gilligan's Island was about how capitalism can't exist in a small scale. People won't tolerate it. That's interesting. Yeah, that's I'll have to look that one.
Yeah, that is a very I'm gonna have to watch that movie too, because that's a really interesting point. Because I'm sitting here trying to think, okay, well, what small scale would have true capitalism? Because most of them don't. They have small scale communism, and then between those groups of little communists, they'll have free trade. Usually, sometimes it's we're bigger and badder, and we like your women, so we're taking them. But yeah, trying to think of that. That's a really good.
I think
on a really small scale.
Just because this is the first I've thought about this, but I think it's a really interesting point. it seems to me that in order for capitalism to work, you have to have a free market. The problem is there is no market on a small enough scale. A market of one, there have been discussions about this, whether a market of one constitutes a market or not. But it doesn't really constitute a free market because there's no competition. So, and a market of two is barely competition. We have two political parties in the U.S. How many times have we said what we really need is a third? There's no real competition between the two. You're kind of set, and if you have any number of check the box on these values, you're going to go to one or you're going to go to the other. There isn't a lot of choice, and that's one reason why the two parties can get away with murder, is because where you're going to go. They ignore a lot of social issues that liberals further on the left would like to see dealt with. The Democrats ignore it because they're like, where are you going to go, right? I mean, you're going to stop supporting us? You're going to become a Republican? That's not going to happen. Now, they still want them at the polls. They still need them. So it's not like they completely ignore it, but a lot of it is lip service, knowing that they don't have an alternative. A market of two is not really a free market either. At three, you start to get a free market because they can compete with each other and even on occasion collude with the other one to exclude a third if the third ends up being undesirable for some way or another. So all of a sudden, preference can start to influence the market. So I think you need to have three at a minimum for a market, but it's not three
right,
people.
And that's in theory.
That's in theory, absolutely.
That's because in the real world, you have a thing called the division of labor, and you have to have a sufficient number of people before you start dividing labor. So you can't really create a market until you have a division of labor, because otherwise, until you have that division of labor, everybody's doing pretty much everything for themselves for the most part. So you don't really get a free market until that point. So that's just in the real world. So maybe it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that one.
One I hadn't thought about. That's why I love this show, man.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's why I love the audience. We get people tossing shit like that in there. That's a really good. That's an interesting one. Yeah, and here we are just talking about it for 10 minutes because that's a brain tickler. That one's gonna get me thinking for a while. Yep. Well, I'm actually going to call.
Now I'm sitting here stuck thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to call tonight a little early. It was a much longer day than anticipated, so I'm a little tired. I don't have as much energy as I wanted to bring to this. It's still going to be a long night going forward, and you see, I already lost my train of thought. So I think I'm going to call it a bit of an earlier night than I'd like to. I like it when these last at least 90 minutes and we can shoot the shit. But especially since again it's been so long. I'm still
frustrated over that conversation because it was like the one time that you were actually brilliant. And nobody's going to be able to experience it. They'll just have to take my word that you made brilliant arguments and insights on our discussion yesterday morning. And
it was one of the first few times
I was really bouncing off of it.
And you had said that of me without being sarcastic. And I was just like, wait, what? You're like, no, I mean it. Here's why. I was just like, wow. I'm sorry. Isandring. ISAND. Hello? Did I get the wrong number?
I'm like.
I'm sorry. What?
Oh no! It was it was so great too because it was like it seemed like a good synergy that happened because of bouncing off everything, and it was like I was on a roll with some of the ideas, and it's like some of it was why I disagreed with some of the stuff that Mr. 𝗲𝗻𝐴 had talked about. Why Aaron? I can never remember his first name. So it was like we were going back and forth, and I had mentioned that this is the first time I've kind of heard his take on things. So it's like I'm trying to listen to it and figure out what exactly he's talking about. It's like, but I don't really know where he's coming from. I don't know what all the tenets are. So it's like when I'm trying to agree with something, it's like I have to qualify this with I superficially agree with what you said because, it's like I'm not familiar with all of this stuff. And then I got some time to think about it, and I'm like, okay, well, here's some areas that I really don't agree, and I don't see a way around, and I don't think, and he didn't justify, but of course he wasn't there to defend himself. So it's always easy to say, well, you didn't make a compelling case when they're not there to, say, well, what part did you not understand, or what part did you think I failed in? I can fill you in. So it's always easier to declare yourself the victor when the other person isn't actually there to defend themselves.
Well, and we weren't disagreeing with anything he said in particular, but I think we both felt that it was that I think we agreed very much on what he had said, sort of the short to midterm solutions were, and what the long-term problems were. I think we both hesitated on the idea that getting rid of the meritocracy would succeed, although I think we both also agreed that there were benefits to it that neither of us had considered. I think we don't know his position well enough that we could argue, but that was it. That was the discussion, and that is one of the things I like about having guests like that. Is we only had him on for an hour, 90 minutes. We're not going to be able to fully understand everything that he says and get into it all, but we are going to be able to have conversations afterwards and be inspired to talk about some of these issues and workshop them for ourselves. And we can always have him back and just say, we thought you were full of shit on this. We're not going to say it that way. I learned that when you talk to guests that way, they don't come back.
They don't like coming back?
I know. It's like, so we're going to be polite. But you try, but, but we'll it was nice to, you and I just got to, because he said a lot of things that I already knew, but he put it in a very different context. And then he said some things that I had never thought of before and didn't know. And that's what I love about the show too, is being able to have those discussions about what they say. And again, we can always bring him back on. We certainly don't want to sit there and say he's right or wrong because of X, Y, and Z. Although I think you and I did agree with like as much as 90% of what he said, unless I'm misrepresenting you.
No, it was like in the context that we were, again, bringing that whole thing up, going, this is the first time I've heard you talk about this. And so it's like I have to qualify my agreement here, but it sounds like I agree with you just based off of what I've heard so far. And that was one of the things we were talking about too, is, it's like we hadn't really heard about this. We weren't sure about all of it. And, maybe we can plumb the depths of, what did we each think that he meant about this? And, did we think that had merit?
May not be a bad idea to try to just do a downtime on, like whenever we do a show like that, make sure that you and I do a downtime afterwards and just do a discussion on that. Because that's when you and I usually have some of our best discussions, is right after a show like that. We'll sit there and say, oh, what'd you think? And we just, shoot the shit for 2 hours on it. And you and I are both...
Another thing we could possibly do is have him come back for like a recorded hang. And, we can do kind of like a downtime. Let's just talk about, okay, here's what we thought you said. Is that what you really said? And here's the problems that we have with it. We don't have to do it necessarily completely live. I mean, it would be nice to have the live chat so people could see what's going on in real time too. But, timing issues, we could do that at any time anybody's free. So we can actually get an understanding of it.
I think that's a great idea. Well, you and I, too, are also both verbal processors, which, A, means that, like, when the two of us are processing simultaneously, it can be a little intense. We're both sort of, just throwing information at each other as quickly as possible. But we're both verbal processors, which means that we're in this kind of position. How do I know what I mean until I hear what I say? Which is an odd thing. Somebody who isn't a verbal processor does not understand that statement. Somebody who is a verbal processor is like, there it is. That's it. I don't know what I mean until I hear what I say. It's an interesting problem.
Talking through it sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I said, one of the reasons I love this show and the audience is that sometimes something will come up that makes me go, hey, that's like a really good point, and I hadn't really thought about that like that before. Small scale free markets, are they even possible?
It was capitalism on a small scale. I was the one who suggested that my initial thought as to why it's not is there's no free market. And what's the minimum requirement for a free market? And I think technically you could get it with 3 sellers of any whatever it is, product, service, 3 on whatever kind of market you have. But the problem is, for a real free market, you need multiple products. For a society to survive, you need multiple products, so you need 3 for each product. So I can't fathom you could have a successful capitalist society in anywhere near like less than 100 people. And my guess is it may be even more than that, but at a minimum, I don't think it could be done at less than 100. So that's it. I had
capitalism was kind of specifically thought up as a solution to large-scale economy. So you don't need something like capitalism if you're living in, say, hunter-gatherer tribal society. If you're living in small tribes where you know everybody, you recognize their face, you know their names, like you know who they are. It's like everybody in that group knows who's not pulling their weight. Everybody in that group knows who's needs actual help. And our sense of morality, our sense of right and wrong aren't violated by those things, because, hey, this person really actually does need help. He needs to be supported, and he still has other valuable things to contribute. Whereas this person's just being a slacker, and they need to suffer for their slackness. So it's like, but we know that stuff. So when you start getting into large scale where you can't know all of that stuff, that's where these different kinds of economies come in. And so far, again, capitalism is the worst idea we've ever had, with one exception. Every other one we've tried. So it's got lots of problems, and we're still kind of new at large-scale economy. So, give us some time. Let's work through some shit, see what works and what doesn't. Don't scrap everything, because it doesn't solve all of the problem. What is that term? Don't let the perfect be the opponent
don't let
of
perfection
progress?
be the enemy of progress. Yeah.
Enemy of. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So it's.
So Titan dropped actually the movie itself. Well, it looks like indie movie. Okay, well, it looks like he dropped the trailer, but either way, you can find the Gilligan Manifesto in the lounge on the In Time Discord. Thanks to Titan. Thank you for dropping that. I'm gonna definitely find it there. If he hadn't put it in the Discord, I wouldn't have gotten to it. So thank you. Come join us on that Discord for that. We're also going to have on Operator Starsky tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope you can join us. I know that's a tough day for you because of the loading. Macmillan will not be able to join us on that day either, unfortunately, so it will be a slightly smaller crew, but there is a good deal going on in Russia, including what appears to be another city having fallen to the Russians, with some consequences that we're going to be discussing tomorrow. That's tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. Operator Starsky. He is a Ukrainian National Guardsman. Most of you know that by now, but he's really in the thick of it over there. And it looks like he's been visiting the front lines, which I'm curious to know what his superiors think of that. But he's been tweeting photos of him and his members of his brigade. And I was just like, I'm not sure he's supposed to be out there as much as he is, but I don't know that they could stop him either. Anyways, that'll be Monday, and then we're hoping we're going to have a video on. That'll be Friday, and then we're going to have a video on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday. People who know me know that he is someone that has influenced me for a very long time in my life, ever since I first learned of him, which I think was the 8th grade. And no, I think it was, it's at any rate. So we'll be having a video a little bit about that and who he was as a person, because I think there's more to that than most people know. That will be on Monday, and that should cover us for a little while now. Any final thoughts? Are you going to be able to join us tomorrow, you think?
I won't be doing any loading or unloading. I'll be driving. So provided that I actually have service, because I will be driving through Montana tomorrow. provided I actually have service, I should be there.
Oh, marvelous. All right.
I know it always ends up working out because it seems like I'm always loading or unloading on a Friday. So a lot of times Fridays come up and it's like, well, that's when I'm arriving to unload, or I'm rushing over here to get loaded before the weekend. So I'll be loading and unloading. That happens a lot on Fridays. So, but this time, no, I will be driving for sure because I already have my load and I'm on my way there. But I will be driving through Montana. So who knows whether I'll have service through the whole thing.
Yeah, I imagine.
Montana saw what happened last time.
Oh yeah, you had to. You were texting me questions.
Middle Oregon.
Yeah, you were texting me questions. All right. Well, hey, it is what it is. If it comes down to that, it comes down to that. Smoke signals. You know, we here on In Time, we find a way to make sure that whatever Isandring has to say, well, we're going to ignore it. But you know, we'll hear it if so. Smoke signals, texts, whatever. I gotta stop busting your balls so much. It's you know, it's marvelous to have these. Well, that's true. That is true. So we will see all of you guys tomorrow. Thank you, Isandring, for joining me. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for the 2 super chats. We really do appreciate it. Join us on the Discord to learn more about our schedule and to keep up with the news. What's going on in Ukraine, in Brazil now is becoming a thing, and with the new Congress, they say they've got a way to work around not having a default. I am not optimistic. Haven't done a deep dive in it, but I'm concerned about the defaults. So we're not there yet. We don't have to worry about it yet, but we will certainly keep an eye on that. So thank you all for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, for Operator Starsky. Have a good night, all.